Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Today started out like any other slow afternoon. We'd already restocked most of the shelves, and there weren't many customers around. I had about 2 hours left on my shift and was basically wandering around looking for something to do. I was trying to find my friend to see if he needed help with anything when I heard raised voices coming from near the wine section. There was also a baby crying, which immediately caught my attention. I'm not usually one to get involved in drama, but something about a crying baby made me want to check it out. When I got closer, I could see my friend talking to a woman who looked really agitated. The woman appeared to be in her mid-30s with badly bleached blonde hair and an orange tan that screamed fake. She had this huge diaper bag slung over her shoulder and was standing next to a stroller with what looked like a very upset baby inside. The whole scene just felt off. I walked over to see what was happening and try to help defuse whatever was going on. The woman immediately rolled her eyes when she saw me approaching. I asked if everything was okay, trying to sound calm and helpful. The woman snapped that everything was fine and that my friend was just being ridiculous. My friend looked relieved to see me and quickly filled me in on what he'd witnessed. Apparently, he'd caught this woman stuffing wine bottles into her diaper bag. When he confronted her about it, she'd started arguing with him. What made it worse was that she'd actually hidden one of the bottles behind the baby in the stroller, which explained why the poor kid was crying so hard. I told the woman she needed to return the wine bottles since they were store property. She flat out refused and said she didn't have to do anything. My friend backed me up and told her she needed to give back what she'd tried to steal. That's when she really lost it and started yelling about how she was a tax-paying citizen who basically owned the store. She screamed that we wouldn't have jobs without customers like her. This woman was acting like stealing was her right because she occasionally shopped here. The baby was still crying, probably uncomfortable from having a wine bottle pressed against its back. Other customers were starting to stare at us, and I knew we needed to get a manager involved. That's when our manager showed up, probably drawn by all the commotion. My friend and I started explaining what we'd witnessed, but before we could finish, the woman suddenly took off, running toward the front of the store. In her panic, she left the stroller and crying baby behind. My manager immediately radioed security, and they managed to stop her at the entrance before she could leave the building. I had to push the abandoned stroller over to where the security guards were holding her. The baby was still crying and I felt terrible for the poor kid. When the woman realized she wasn't going to escape, she completely lost it. She reached into her diaper bag, pulled out one of the stolen wine bottles, and hurled it at my manager's head. It barely missed him and shattered against the wall behind him. The security guards yelled at each other to get her down and had to tackle her to prevent her from throwing another bottle. Glass was everywhere, and she was screaming and thrashing around like a wild animal. One of my other co-workers called the police while my manager stood there in shock. My manager said he couldn't believe she had just tried to assault him with a bottle. The woman kept screaming back that we were harassing her and that this was discrimination. My friend was trying to comfort the crying baby while I collected the remaining wine bottles from her bag. There were 4 bottles total, all expensive stuff from our premium section. The whole situation was insane. When the police arrived, they found her still struggling with security. She kept screaming about her rights and how we were all conspiring against her. The officers looked like they'd dealt with this type of person before. The officer told her she needed to calm down because they were going to need to talk to her about what happened. She immediately started yelling that we had attacked her and that she wanted to press charges against us. The officer just shook his head and started taking statements from everyone involved. That's when things got even more interesting. It turned out the baby wasn't even hers. Child Protective Services showed up, and we learned that the woman had been babysitting her niece. The baby's real mother arrived about an hour later, looking absolutely horrified. The real mother kept apologizing about her sister and said she had no idea she would do something like this. She explained that her sister was a known alcoholic and drug addict who'd supposedly been clean for 3 years. She was a single mom who needed someone to watch her daughter for a few hours while she worked overtime. Her regular babysitter couldn't make it, and her parents were out of town. The mother told us that her sister kept telling their family she was sober and had been to rehab. She said she never would have left her baby with her if she'd known she was still using. My manager decided to press charges for theft and attempted assault. The woman was arrested and taken away, still screaming about how unfair everything was. Child Protective Services let the real mother keep her baby after determining she wasn't at fault, though they said they'd be doing follow-up visits. The next day, my friend and I got called into the manager's office. Even though we'd been trying to protect the baby and stop a theft, we'd violated store policy by confronting a shoplifter directly. We were supposed to call security and let them handle it. My manager told us he understood why we did what we did and that he was proud we cared about the baby's safety. But he explained that we could have been seriously hurt and that the store had these policies for a reason. We both got written up, but honestly, I don't regret what we did. That poor baby was being used as a prop in a theft, and who knows what else that woman might have done if we hadn't intervened. I've always liked petite women. It probably comes from my mom and several aunts who were all short but had incredibly strong personalities. My mom especially taught me that small doesn't mean weak, and I've always found that combination of delicate appearance and fierce spirit attractive. When I was in college in Fort Lauderdale about 10 years ago, I was studying photography. One afternoon, I had finished a beach shoot for my homework and ended up near this bar where my friend worked. He had told me about this really good scotch they served, so I grabbed a glass and sat across the street on the seawall to read my book. I found a nice spot on the wall facing the ocean and settled in with my drink and paper bag. The weather was perfect, and I was enjoying just watching the waves while sipping my scotch. After about an hour, I was almost done with my drink and thinking about heading home when this girl approached me. She was absolutely gorgeous, maybe 5'3" with long red hair that caught the sunlight beautifully. She was petite but carried herself with confidence, and her whole look was put together perfectly. Her makeup, clothes, everything about her looked mature, not like a teenager. She asked if she could sit next to me, saying it looked like the best spot on the beach. I told her she was welcome to join me and agreed that the view was great. We started chatting about random stuff. She was funny and seemed really mature, talking about college plans and work. I was enjoying the conversation enough that when she mentioned being thirsty, I offered to grab us some drinks from the bar across the street. She said a strawberry daiquiri sounded perfect. Now she looked young enough that my protective instincts kicked in. The last thing I needed was to get arrested for buying alcohol for a minor, so I told her I'd need to see some ID first, since she looked young enough to get me in serious trouble if I didn't check. She said that was no problem and pulled out her driver's license. According to the ID, she had just turned 21 the month before. Everything looked legitimate to me, so I took it with me to the bartender. The bartender examined the ID carefully, ran his finger over it, held it up to the light, the whole routine. He didn't seem concerned at all and served me both drinks without question. I came back about 50 minutes later with our drinks and we continued our conversation. But when we kept talking and she worked on her daiquiri, something started feeling off. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly, but my gut was telling me something wasn't right. She seemed younger than 21 in subtle ways. Still, the bartender had approved the ID, so I figured if it was fake, that was on her, not me. We were just finishing our drinks when I saw this couple walking toward us. They looked like the most stereotypical tourists you could imagine. Matching sun hats, cameras around their necks, the works. The woman called out to the girl, saying they had been looking everywhere for her. The girl's whole demeanor changed instantly. She went from confident young woman to nervous teenager in about 2 seconds. The man noticed her red Solo cup and asked what she was drinking. She told him she didn't know, just some kind of strawberry slushy thing that I had gotten for her. She pointed at me when she said it. The man grabbed her cup and took a big sniff. Then he started yelling that it was alcoholic and demanding to know how I dared give his daughter an alcoholic drink. He threatened to call the police right then and there. My blood went cold when he said daughter. The woman jumped in, calling me a pervert and accusing me of probably drugging the drink too. She yelled that I was going straight to jail for giving a 15-year-old a drugged drink. 15. The number hit me like a brick to the face. I tried to explain about the ID, telling them she had shown me identification that said she was 21 and that the bartender had checked it thoroughly. The woman refused to believe it, insisting their daughter would never do something like that. She asked the girl directly if she would ever get a fake ID, and the girl just shook her head while looking down at the sand. The woman yanked her daughter behind her like she was protecting her from some kind of monster. I realized there was no point in arguing with these people. I sat back down on the seawall and decided to wait for the police. At least the bartender could back up my story about checking the ID. When I sat there trying to stay calm while they continued yelling at me, I noticed something glinting in the sand behind the wall. It looked like a driver's license had been dropped there. About 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. Two officers got out, and I recognized one of them immediately. She was part of our weekly Dungeons and Dragons group, along with the bartender. Talk about awkward timing. The parents immediately rushed over to the officers, dragging their daughter with them. The man told them thank God they were there, and explained that I had given their 15-year-old daughter an alcoholic drink that was probably drugged too. The woman added that when they confronted me, I had claimed the girl had fake ID, but insisted their daughter would never do such a thing. She offered to let them search the girl's purse to prove it. The girl nodded and opened her purse for the officers to see. No ID inside, of course. My friend gave me this really conflicted look when her partner walked over to talk to me. I knew him too from a few D&D sessions, and I could tell this was the last situation he wanted to deal with involving people he knew. Before he could say anything, I pointed down behind the seawall and suggested he might want to take a look down there first. He leaned over and spotted the ID in the sand. After retrieving it and examining it closely, he looked back at me with raised eyebrows. I explained that it was the fake ID she had shown me and that the bartender over there had checked it too before serving the drinks. I told him I had no idea she was underage. The officer took another long look at the girl, really studying her appearance this time. His eyes went wide when he took in how sophisticated her whole look was for a child. He pulled my friend aside and they had a brief, quiet discussion. Then something beautiful happened. They walked back over to the family and told them they were all under arrest. The girl was charged with possession of a fake ID, and both parents were hit with child endangerment charges for allowing their 15-year-old daughter to dress and act like an adult woman while unsupervised on a beach full of bars. The parents started yelling about how unfair it was and demanding to speak to supervisors, but the officers calmly explained that allowing a minor to obtain fake identification and put herself in dangerous situations constituted neglect. The girl finally broke down and admitted she had gotten the fake ID from someone at school and had been using it for weeks. We heard later at our next Dungeons and Dragons session that all three of them were held for the full 48 hours. Their vacation was completely ruined. They ended up with major fines, and the Department of Children and Family Services in their home state was contacted about the incident. Apparently, this wasn't the first time the parents had been reported for questionable supervision of their daughter. My parents founded the resort about 15 years ago. My dad is the chairman of the board of directors now. Because of this, I grew up around the business and have even sat in on some board meetings over the years. Most of the senior staff know me pretty well, since I was homeschooled and didn't have many friends my age. I know it sounds kind of sad, but the staff and board members basically became like extended family to me. I'm pretty short at 5'7", and I look way younger than I actually am, which becomes important later in the story. People often mistake me for being in high school when I'm actually in my 20s. My fiancé and my sister were visiting for a week. We wanted to spend some time with my mom and just relax at the resort. It was midsummer, so the place was absolutely packed. When we pulled into the parking lot, cars were circling around, trying to find spots. Luckily, my family has some private parking spaces reserved. When we walked toward the reception area, I noticed my dad's car wasn't there, but my mom's was. The lobby was crowded with people checking in. One of the staff members, who's known me since I was a kid, spotted me right away and came over to greet me. He told me that my mother was currently in a meeting and asked if I wanted him to take our luggage up to our room. I thanked him and said yes, but my fiance kept one bag with our swim clothes since we wanted to hit the pool first. After swimming for a while, we decided to grab lunch at the resort restaurant. I had thrown on a blue shirt but was still wearing my gray swim trunks. I didn't think much about it at the time, but my outfit looked almost identical to what the waiters wore. The only difference was that the staff uniforms had staff written on them. We were sitting at our table, just chatting and enjoying our food. My sister had ordered something incredibly spicy and convinced me to try it without warning me first. She knows I can't handle spicy food at all, but she thought it would be funny. When I was chugging ginger ale to cool my mouth down, I heard someone behind me rudely calling out to get someone's attention. I figured someone was just trying to get a waiter's attention, so I ignored it and kept talking with my fiance and sister. The ginger ale was barely helping with the burning in my mouth from that spicy food. Suddenly, someone grabbed my shoulder really roughly from behind. I was so startled that I choked on my soda and spit it all over my sister. She yelled out in disgust about how gross it was, while my fiance immediately stood up and started to ask if I was okay. But before she could finish, this woman interrupted her by yelling that she had been trying to get my attention for a while. I'm usually pretty calm and don't get angry easily, so I looked up at her and politely asked if she needed anything. The woman started screaming at me, demanding to know why I was eating with the guests instead of doing my job. I quickly realized she thought I was a staff member because of what I was wearing. I was getting annoyed by how loudly she was yelling when she was standing right next to me. I tried to tell her that I didn't work there, but she cut me off and yelled at me to shut up. She claimed she was a VIP at the resort. I tried to stay calm but raised my voice a little so she could hear me over her yelling. I started to say again that I didn't work there, but that's when she slapped me hard. She screamed at me not to use that tone with her and called me a brat. Her long fingernails scraped across my cheek when she hit me, leaving a deep cut that started bleeding immediately. My fiancée went pale when she saw the blood dripping down my face. My sister grabbed her phone and called our mom right away. The manager had been walking over when he heard the commotion, but when he saw her slap me, he broke into a run. He called out to the woman and asked if I was all right. The manager had worked at the resort for several years and was pretty casual with me since he'd known me for so long. My fiancée was pressing napkins against my cheek to stop the bleeding. The woman demanded to speak to the manager and pointed at me, saying she wanted me fired for being unprofessional. She couldn't understand why they had hired such an idiot. She spoke like she owned the place. The manager tried to explain to her that I didn't work there, but she accused him of trying to cover for me. She said she wanted him fired too. I had never seen someone's face turn as red in that moment. She looked like a tomato. That's when I saw my mother running over with 2 security guards. My sister had called and told her everything that happened. When my mom saw my fiancé holding a blood-soaked napkin against my face while this woman continued yelling at me, I thought she might explode. My mother demanded to know what had happened and ordered the guards to arrest the woman. The woman started struggling and demanded to know what gave my mother the right to have her arrested. She wanted to know who my mother thought she was. That's when my mother revealed that she was the owner of the resort and asked how this woman dared to slap her son. Karen went from bright red to white in about 2 seconds. Her eyes and mouth were wide open like she'd seen a ghost. When the guards dragged her away, some of the other customers in the restaurant started clapping. My mother rushed over to check on my face. She's always been super protective of me. She was the one who decided I should be homeschooled after I got bullied in middle school. The cut on my cheek was pretty deep and ended up needing stitches, but the scar faded completely after a few months. Later, my mother told me that the woman had been charged with second-degree assault and would be spending the next month in jail. She was also permanently banned from the resort and all of our other properties. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.